So this is Freelance Writing 101, what every rookie needs to know. As FinCon keeps growing, I think we have more and more people who are entering the freelance writing space, so it's just become so valuable to get just the basics. And I have some amazing, amazing veterans and colleagues, I guess. Yeah, we all work from home in our pajamas, but yeah, we're all coworkers. So just super excited to have them today. My name is Zina Kumok, and I'm also a freelance writer. And I've written for outlets like Mint, Money Under 30, Guidevine, Quicken Loans, and I've been doing this full time for about 3 years. And so we are just super excited to have everyone. Paula, I'm sorry your picture's not up there. This is Paula Pant. She's kind of a legend in the space. She writes the site Afford Anything, which holds a community of more than 53,000 email subscribers. She's the host of the Afford Anything podcast, which has nearly 4 million downloads, which is huge. Both of them spread the idea that you can afford anything, but not everything. She's built financial independence through real estate investing and has traveled to more than 40 countries. And I'm just going to include this because you wrote this. She writes about herself in the third person. Right here is Jackie Lamb, and she's an LA-based money writer who is passionate about helping creatives with their finances and cultivating community among entrepreneurs. Her clients include Fortune 500 companies, fintech startups, and her work has been featured in Forbes, Business Insider, The Muse, and Good. She blogs at HeyFreelancer.com and is the city organizer for the Freelancers Union Spark events and Freelance Friday, a monthly global co-working meetup. Lindsay VanSomeren, right here in the middle, is a freelance writer living in University Place, Washington, with a house full of pets, including 2 cats, a dog, and a husband.
It's true.
Fair enough. She's been a professional dog sled racer, wildlife researcher, and a participant in the National Spelling Bee. In her spare time, she enjoys weightlifting, running, homebrewing, and blogging about her personal finance journey at notorious
DEBT?
Yeah, which is probably the best personal finance name I've thought of. So again, this panel is designed for people who are completely new to the business, but if you have some experience, I really hope you'll glean some insights. So our first question, and they should have this up in a minute. Our first question is, how do I get started and how do I sell myself as a writer if I don't have a writing background? So Paula, we'll start with you.
Sure. The number one thing, there's a difference between having a writing background and knowing how to be a good writer. And a lot of times, there are some people who think that just because they're literate, that makes them a writer. It does not. If you aren't a good writer, you're not going to get many writing jobs. So regardless of whether or not you have a writing background, learn the mechanics of good writing. Some books that I really enjoy are On Writing by Stephen King, Strunk White's Elements of Style, basically anything that tells you to kill your adverbs. Those, follow some of those, learn the AP style, read the AP style book. Not that you'll necessarily, actually a lot of clients do still make you follow it. And even if they don't, the fact that you write in AP style signals a level of professionalism to your clients. They'll recognize that right away. I always recognize it when people, even bloggers, when they break that, and there's just something in that still indicates not a professional. So, that's what I would recommend. People are busy and they're not gonna have time to look extensively through your resume, so they're gonna pick up on the clues that within your writing that signal whether you're a professional or merely somebody who is literate.
Yeah, for sure. And not to say it doesn't hurt to have a background in writing, but when you're working in a creative field like writing or design or just being an artist, your portfolio is everything. So we live in a time when if you have some strong writing clips, whether it's writing for another blogger or just writing on your own, that is your stepping stone. I didn't go to J school or anything. I actually studied anthropology, but I was always writing. I had internet papers, I had a blog, and I'm sure there's quite quite a few of us here who have blogs and create content of our own. And so just like honing in the craft, you know, like, because imitation is learning, right? So if there's a writer that you like, or there's a style that you want to emulate, just practice it. Like, get that blog up, write, create samples, because, you know, you can have an MFA in writing, or you can be a writer. So just doing it, practicing it, experimenting with it is going to make you hireable, because that's what they're looking at, is just writing samples. And if you have great writing samples, then they'll be willing to take a risk and hire you for that first article.
I would just echo what Jackie said. I come from a science background. I have peer-reviewed published journal articles, which if you've ever read them, they're great at conveying information and putting people to sleep. So just anything you can do to practice your craft, find people, like she said, who you really like their style, and then start up a blog. You don't necessarily have to have these grand designs of being a six-figure blogger. It's just a place for you to put your words to kind of get practice. And the more you practice, the better you'll get. The first things that I wrote on the very first blog I ever had, it was called Knit Nerd Lab. It was about knitting. It was terrible. I look back now and I'm like, I don't even want to read this. But just practice and you'll get better over time.
Yeah, I would say if you literally don't have any clips, it's not a bad idea to ask another blogger here if you can do a free guest post for them, because that's still a clip. That's still something that someone chose to publish on their own site. And, you know, if you send it out as an example of your work, no one knows if you were paid for it or not, or if it was a friend helping you out. No one's going to know that. They're just going to see, oh, okay, like her name is on something else that's someone else decided was good enough to publish, and that conveys a lot.
Jumping in on that, when I got my first major recurring client, which was About.com, which is now called The Balance, I think the way that I applied for them was with a clip of a guest post that I wrote for Budgets Are Sexy, and then a clip of a guest post that I wrote for a blog called Faith in Finance that I don't think exists anymore. So, yeah, and that totally got me into About.com.
Yeah, and like for me, it was just having a blog called Cheapsters, because I love just connecting with frugal people and saving money, and like, you know, it wasn't cool back then to be frugal. Now it's a little more mainstream and hip, maybe not. So, but yeah, and I came to FinCon actually in 2014, and there was a Freelancer marketplace, and there was a guy who was a VP at Contently. And Contently is a freelancer platform, like a platform to connect you with brands. I had no idea who he was. I just was doing this like weird thing with money, like this Twitter thing. I came up with this like dollar bills, and he was cool. And so I talked to him, but I didn't know like Contently was this big hiring thing, and he put me on a team, and that's just how. And I had like samples on my blog, so I had never guest posted. I'd never written for pay or anywhere, but that was just my start. So yeah, it just kind of stepping stone from a blog to or whatever to something paid. It's really cool.
Yeah, and that's what I did too. I had my blog, and then I started guest posting for a few people. I only did a few of them. The first one was for Michelle at Making Sense of Sense. And then from there, I did my first paid assignment. It was an article for the Penny Hoarder. They had a really easy submission process. I don't know if it's still that way, but just taking these little tiny stepping stones and just trying to incrementally get better. You don't have to immediately jump in and start writing for, you know, U.S. News or something like that.
So moving on, question number 2. What is the best way to find and approach new clients, i.e. email, cold calling, social media? What are some ways that you think is the best way to find a client?
I would say the best way to find a client is to put yourself in a position in which they find you. And that's what the power of having a blog can do. Oftentimes, if you have a blog, you make it known that you are a freelance writer for hire, they have the opportunity to see your writing style by going through your articles, and then they will often reach out to you. So I'll just invert the question and say, as you grow your reputation as a freelancer for hire who writes in the topic of X, then you increase the likelihood that they'll find you. But to directly answer this question, if you were to find and approach them, I mean, certainly there's job boards, but in that case, you're competing against this huge universe of people. So something like this where, you know, you're at a conference, so somewhere like FinCon is a really good place to have that face-to-face meeting that can set you aside from all of the dozens and dozens of responses that a digital post would, like a digital job posting would lead to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's having a platform. I think we're in a great position being money nerds. There's a lot of opportunities for content creation in this space. And if you have a blog and you create content and it has some insights or a unique voice or some kind of niche, that really will set you apart. For me, I think it's really what you do best. So for me, I just like to have some kind of community. So actually now I get a lot of referrals from friends or from people I've written for, right? So like editors will come and go, they'll leave their post and they'll go somewhere else, and they usually will depending on the type of content, they'll take you with them. Or you might have a friend who's super busy, she might refer you to a job. So just making connections here with fellow writers, fellow content creators is really valuable, because you just never know where you're gonna get that next lead, and just fellow friends, who like, oh, this editor's hiring. And for me, that, and then also LinkedIn, I get like quite a few inquiries on LinkedIn, and it's just having a strong LinkedIn profile with like keywords, just what you do. Actually, Lewis, who's in the audience, is amazing at that. And he last year did a great talk on LinkedIn, but just following form and kind of positioning it. Because I think, Lewis, you said last year, your LinkedIn, it's like a sales pitch, right? It's not is that right? It's not really a resume or something. So anyway, but like just think of it as a sales page and having keywords and stuff. But I also have friends who do cold email, and like Paula said, like you're competing against lots of people. It's a timing thing. LinkedIn, if you're on LinkedIn and you see somebody who just got hired as editor-in-chief or content manager at a fintech, app or something, hit them up. That's happened to me. I'll just say, hey, congratulations. I do content creation. If you ever need anything of a writer, here's what I do. And then I also have people who do the Upwork stuff. So I think it really also depends on where you're at and your personality. I'm terrified at cold calling or cold emailing, to be honest. I've never been great at it. It's not my personality, but I'm better at like connecting people and having friends who are freelancers. So that's my thing. So to really think about your personality, what you like, what you're good at, and then from that you can figure out what your best entry point is to getting those leads.
Cold calling is something which terrifies me. I still do it. It was how I got my start. When I first started, I made a goal to reach out to 5 new clients a day. So I just emailed anybody and everybody I could think of, who I could find their email address for, who was interested or who was writing for topics that I was interested in. This was terrifying for me because I'm a normally shy, reserved person, but I just said to hell with it. I'm just gonna go ahead and do it, and I'm gonna check off this box. And most people will say no, but you only need a few people to say yes to get started. And that was the biggest thing for me. And then I didn't have much of a network when I started, but coming to events like this, like FinCon, just reach out to everybody and anybody you can, because those are the connections that have really pushed me forward the most from after I got my start with cold calling. Another tip that I have for finding clients, I don't know, I've never seen this advertised, but what I did when I got started was I went on to the portfolios of other writers who I admired and saw who they were writing for. And you don't necessarily need to like poach their clients or whatever, but if you go to a bunch of different writers' websites and see who they're writing for, if you see the same name on a bunch of different people's portfolios, there's a good chance that they might work with you as well, because they're open to working with many writers.
I think one of the most obscure ways I found clients is, if you guys know Harrow, Help a Reporter Out, they send out emails, and if you look at the person who's requesting it, if you look them up on LinkedIn and they're a freelance writer, well, that means that publication uses freelance writers.
Yeah.
And I've gotten really good clients. I mean, really it's just about being creative. Like, job boards can seem really enticing at the beginning because, oh, look, well, they said they're hiring, but you'll be competing against people charging, pennies for a word. And that's just, you don't want to be scraping the bottom of the barrel. You want to be positioning yourself, well, I'm still an authority, I might be new, but I have some clips and I'm a real person. Like, it's good to stand out. You don't want to get lost in the crowd. Okay, question 3. This is one people ask me a lot. How do I find story ideas? And I guess, how do I find new story ideas? How do I come up with interesting pitches that an editor is going to respond to, because I think we all know a lot of editors will say, oh yeah, we're looking for freelance writers, send me some pitches. So Jackie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I usually just like see what my friends are writing and just repeat. No, I'm kidding. I don't do that. I think story ideas. First, like I do a lot of pitches for that cater to the outlet, right? Because I think a mistake that's not even a mistake, but like a lot of beginners do is like they have this great story, and they're trying to find the right outlet for that story, which is actually the backward approach. You should just go, which is great for your blog or something, or Medium, you know, if you want to post a really like great personal essay, but then like shopping around, like you just don't know who is looking for that. So you just go to the places you want to write for, and then just see what they already do and where there might be holes, and then pitch based on that. And then I come up with story ideas that way. A lot of just from anything. Like sometimes there's like a newsworthy, something news that's trending. You might have like a personal finance twist to that, or it could be your own life. If you know something that you're going through, like you're starting a family or you're buying a house, which you know Paula is legendary at. You know, just passive income stuff. So a lot of it is your own stuff, because a lot of content places are looking, well, depending on what kind of content place, they're looking for something with insight. So if you're someone who is a travel hacker and you really know credit cards, that might be a good place for you to pitch ideas, because you're gonna have an insight, or you're gonna do something a little more unique than someone who doesn't like review credit cards for fun, or someone who's really into frugality, you know, you're gonna have some cool hacks, right, that might give you a unique thing that that the editor is looking for, that somebody else hasn't pitched yet. But it's hard. Sometimes you have to kind of cycle through, because if you're writing for a lot of outlets, you're constantly having to turn out story ideas. But if you're studying the outlets and you can kind of get like an idea of structure or context, that'll kind of like jog the inspiration. And so I have like actually got Google Docs for each of the outlets I write for, and I'll just, whenever there's a story that might be good for that, I'll just jot it down. Even though they're not looking for pitches right now, like it's just good to do. Mm-hmm. You know, just having that well full. Because it does get empty sometimes.
Always keep like a Trello, Word doc, Google Doc. Mm-hmm. Write every story idea you have. I mean, I'm sure we all have hundreds that we haven't used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I'd say is, the more, for me at least, the more I read, the more story ideas I come up with. So anytime that you're at a loss, just start reading.
Yeah, and I would echo that as well. I try to find, like, I'll read story ideas, and then I'll try to think how that could relate to finance. And it doesn't even have to be a finance article necessarily. It can just be like a news story about, I don't know, SeaWorld or something. And then you can think about ideas of maybe how to travel hack to SeaWorld, things like that. Just new takes on things. And the more you read, the more those ideas will cross over. So the more ideas you will have as well. And I will say this, it also helps to have clients who assign you articles, so then you don't even have to think of the story idea.
Yeah, I will say I think about 60% of my clients I send pitches, and then the rest of the time they assign. But even when they send pitches and they assign you things, it's always good to be able to have a well in case they say, hey, you know, I want to assign you something, but, you know, we're just, you know, they're running out of ideas, you know, editors are busy, and if you can come to them and say, hey, you know, I already have what could be my, you know, assignment for this month, I think that's going to make you look really good in their eyes. And yeah, just I recycle ideas all the time. If an editor doesn't like it, I'll save it for the next one, and, you know, years go by before I use an idea that I wrote down. Okay, what are your favorite free or low-cost tools for invoicing, tracking expenses, project management, etc.?
So a few of them. So in terms of project management, I really like Wunderlist, WUNDER list. And for invoicing, FreshBooks. That's good for both invoicing and tracking expenses. What else? Evernote is where I tend to capture a lot of my ideas. Asana I've used in the past, and I think it's good if you're working with teams, but for working solo, Wunderlist.
Yeah, and I use Todoist, just any to-do list app that works for you to help you organize, I like Todoist. I don't know if Wunderlist does this, but you can organize tasks by priority level. So that really helps me because I'm like, these are the things I know I have to get done today, and then these are things that I can do if I have extra time. I also really like Trello for organizing my story ideas. So I literally have a column for this is an assignment that's been accepted, and then I've written it, and it's been edited, and now it's ready for invoicing. So that really helps me keep track of all the stories that I have in motion. I also really like FreshBooks. If you're going for the budget option, I hear spreadsheets work just fine, but I just like the functionality of FreshBooks and being able to send out invoices and checking to see if they've paid them or not, or even open them up is an important thing sometimes. Yeah.
I'm pretty terrible at like creating systems and getting really into a system and then just like ignoring it or like not using it. So I think for anything organizational, I just use Google Docs. But I have used like Asana and Trello. I use Toggle a lot just to track time, just to see how much time I'm spending. And then in terms of like invoicing, right now I'm using QuickBooks Self-Employed, which is really nice. I love the app. But let me see. And Anko, you're just starting out, Anko is free, I think, and that's a nice one. And .co. But I just try to keep it simple, like just a couple of things that I use, because I think there's so many tools for freelancers that we can like get a little bombarded and like sign up for a bunch of stuff. So I think just one or two.
Yeah, I think it's easy to see what someone else is doing and say, okay, well, I need to start using Asana when the functionality might be way more than you need. Or I know for a while I was paying the annual premium for HelloSign, which is like DocuSign, just a place where you can sign electronically. Which, if you're a freelance writer and you're getting new clients all the time, you're going to be signing W-9s electronically. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I can downgrade to the free version because I'm not using this as much as I need. And it's just, when you're a professional, it's easy to think that you need all the fancy tools, but I love Trello. Trello's completely free. There's some paid things you can do, but you don't need to do it. I use...
There's definitely like a difference between like wanting to feel like having a freelancing business and getting all the tools just to feel fancy and like actually using them, right? And then like it just takes time to see if you're going to use it and is it worth paying for. Like I think now like Google to-do list, Google Docs, or is it Gmail to-do list is getting more robust, so you could just probably use that or something.
I mean, I know a very, very, very successful freelance writer who I think just uses a pen and paper, like a desk calendar system to track her assignments, and that works for her. So it really, you don't have to go out and teach yourself Asana or Trello or any of these things if just keeping a simple notebook works for you. As long as you're tracking your assignments and tracking invoices. For me, I like FreshBooks because it reminds my clients, when to pay the invoice, and then it sends them a late fee if they haven't paid it. So that's really nice because once you start getting a lot of clients, I know I've forgotten about invoices before I started using FreshBooks, and they've gone in just 2 months because, if you don't remind a client to pay you, sometimes they're not going to do it out of the kindness of their hearts. So it's just always good to, if you need a tool like that, then sure, go out, pay for it, buy it. Okay, what is the most important thing a new freelancer can do to be successful?
I would say just be persistent. You're going to get a lot of rejection, especially at first, especially if you follow my approach of cold emailing 5 people a day. And that's really tough. The first rejection you have is going to be really, really tough on your psyche if that's something you try to avoid, like I traditionally do. So just sticking past all the rejections. You're going to make mistakes. Maybe you'll go over a deadline. Maybe a client just won't like an article. And dealing with all of those things in stride and just not taking it too personally has been the biggest thing that's probably helped me move forward.
Yeah, I agree. Just keep hustling, basically. Like, take the approach or take the mindset of looking for much more work than you could possibly ever get, so that way the rejection comes as a little bit of a relief, even because if everyone said yes, there's no way that you could deal with that workload.
Yeah, for sure. Just to piggyback, just treat it like as an experiment and not so much like a success or failure. So I think I get hung up on this all the time. It's just not starting because I'm afraid of the results. So if you just think of it as trial and error, because the transition, I think if you're someone who loves, you're a wordsmith and you love to write, but you haven't ever done it professionally, is just, there's definitely a gap you kind of have to mind. And working as a professional writer, dealing with editors and stuff, it can be kind of harrowing. So just think of it as an experiment, and you're going to just get better. And then I really think something that's understated is just building community, and because those are the people who help you. Like, you can commiserate over, stressful edits or crazy editors, or just like, why is this person not getting back, or whatever. Rates, negotiating rates. Those are all questions that there's no blueprint for it. There's no standard. So this is a great place to just meet people who create content and just build that network, because you always will need a network, no matter what stage you're at as a freelance writer.
Yeah, I would say for me, I think it's just about communication. We're all busy, and let's say you get assigned an article and you're so excited it's your first paid gig or it's your first gig with a new client, and you're just struggling. You just don't know how you're going to do it. You're not finding sources, or they're not emailing you back. I think the one thing I've learned throughout the years that stays constant is that if you reach out to an editor first and say, hey, you assigned me this, the PR rep isn't getting back to me, or this person said they would share their story and they didn't, or I'm just struggling to find the data on this. If you approach them and tell them you're having a problem, then they're going to work with you and help you fix it. If they have to ping you or reach out to you, even if you respond quickly, just stay on top of it. Just be proactive. And if you an emergency comes up, or you may be forgotten on an assignment, you're going to miss a deadline, just ask them for an extension. I think we've all asked for an extension and been granted one. So, and if you wait for them to reach out, they're going to be a little annoyed. So as long as you're just being proactive and communicating with your editors, they're going to be happy. And what I like to think is, am I making this person's life easier, or am I making it harder? Because we all remember the people in our lives who make our lives easier. And we do remember the people who make them harder, but we're going to go back to the person who made it easier or who tried. So I would say that's probably my biggest one. We have a lot of time left for Q&A, which I did deliberately because I know new writers always have lots of questions. So just pass this mic around. How do I turn it on? Or, you know what? If you just project, I'll repeat your question, and then it'll be saved for the video. So I was saying, yeah.
First of all, comment and then a question. I just want to echo what you said, Paula, about positioning yourself to be where people are looking. So when you made that suggestion to me, and to me to put a work with me page on my blog, and I did that, and my first client found me that way. Didn't know I was doing it, so I definitely recommend that. And second, once you kind of get going, how do you manage producing your own content along with
Yes, I do.
So she asked, how do you manage producing your own content while also trying to produce content for your own blog or podcast or wherever you're producing content for?
It's tough. The more your freelance business grows, the harder that balancing act becomes, because essentially, once your freelance business grows enough and your blog or podcast or both also grow enough, then essentially you'll find yourself in the position where you're balancing two full-time jobs. And for me, it eventually came to a decision point. And I reached the point where I was like, you know what, I can do one or the other, but I can't do both. So that was when I dropped my freelance writing clients so I could go full-time into purely my blog. And what that resulted in, because I hadn't been monetizing my blog other than using it as a lead generator to get freelance work. So when I dropped my freelance clients, my income dropped 90%. I mean, it was terrifying because I'd spent so many years building this and building this and building this. And after all of the early years of struggle, and then finally I'd built it, and finally I had the six-figure business. And now that I have it, I'm gonna kill it. And that was what I had to do in order to be able to devote myself to the blog and the podcast. So it does reach that decision point, and then, at least in terms of income, you become a beginner all over again.
way that I manage that is, again, by finding clients who will assign you articles, because then it's not about you. It's about like a product review or something like that. I don't really have any good tips for how to manage both of them simultaneously, but that's what I do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a great, because I struggle with that now, and it's like, because you're kind of occupying the same muscle, right? Because before I was blogging just to blog, and then people would come to me, they'd find me through my blog, you know, with that page, and then it kind of stopped serving its purpose because I was getting more and more work. And so, I mean, right now I've got to the point where I'm just staggering. So like, I'm trying to do like X amount for clients, and then I can go back to my stuff. But it's never, I don't think it's a perfect science. And I think, Paula, that makes sense. Like, you're gonna have to kill one or the other. And right now, maybe it feels like necessity or whatever. It's like clients are right now, but it's constant struggle. So it's a great question.
I think that
Very real question.
I just want to add that even though I decided to kill off the freelance writing aspect of my business, it would also be totally viable to kill off the blog or podcast version of your business. It's just which one do you want to go full in on?
I'm sure, Paula, that was a risk for you, right? Like,
Yeah.
to devote all that, but not knowing now you have gotten 4 million downloads on your podcast, but like,
Yeah.
that's not a guarantee. So that's hard to, and we all know that money is like, it's the draw of getting paid now versus something that might pay off later is a tough one. And I mean, yeah.
I think that the tough part is just deciding, when you're a freelancer, there is no end to your day. 6 p.m. rolls around, you could still keep working. So I think if you find a time to say, you know what, I did the majority of things on my to-do list, and now I'm going to go work on my own side project, and making that commitment to yourself. And it's okay if you decide one day, I've basically just given up on my blog at this point. It's okay if you decide that one day, you know what, I would rather be freelance writing, you know, from 9 to 6, and then hanging out with my friends or my husband or my dogs afterwards. It's perfectly okay not to have a blog and a freelance writing career and trying to exercise and fit in the miracle morning every day at 6 a.m. It's perfectly okay to just do one or two things. I think it's easy to get caught up in, you know, the 80,000 things that other people are doing and, you know, lose track. If you're supporting yourself and you're mostly happy and content, then, you know, just do what works for you.
Yeah, and I will say I'm at a point like that right now too, right now, where I haven't posted on my blog in 2 months, and I've never gone more than a week for 3 years without posting on my blog, just because I don't have enough time to do both. And I don't know what I'm going to choose right now. It's still up in the air. It's tough. There's no clear answers here.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions. One is, how many pieces are you generating by the week, per se, either freelancing or on your own blog? And then the other question is, how do you ensure that you're writing original content in the environment where there's so much content already?
So she asked how many pieces we generate each week or each month, and then how do we produce original content when there's so much content out there?
In terms of the original content, for at least on my own personal channels, and with a client, you have to write whatever the client wants you to write. But for my own personal channels, for the blog and the podcast, what I write is a philosophy of money and a philosophy of life disguised as money. And so in that way, it becomes original because it's not a keyword SEO driven, like 6 ways to save $150. It's much more broadly, here is a framework for how to think about life, told through the story or through the angle of money. And that fundamentally keeps it original.
Yeah. And Paula's like so great at that, right? Your whole tagline, like, stop trading time for money and like afford anything. So, and I know Lindsay's work pretty well too, because you have that science background. So, I mean, where am I going with this? Okay, so I guess it's just, the first question was, okay, the original content, and what was?
How many pieces do we produce?
So I actually do have like a spreadsheet, like, and then have tallied. So on average, I wouldn't say anywhere from, I do produce a lot, like probably 20 pieces a month, or sometimes more. I don't know, it just varies. Like some people want something really quick and short that you've already done. Like, this is like a budgeting thing. Like I know budgets. Some require more research and stuff. So I think that's my cadence. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, but around 25 a month, which is a lot, right? And so how to keep it original, when I was starting out, everything felt original because this is the first time you're writing it. Everything felt unique and fresh. And then I would get really stuck on wanting to come up with the most original story ideas. But those don't always exist because, like you said, there's so much content out there. There's so much content about money. So what I started to do was just drawing from, I think I try to do the framework thing. Like for me, it's like design your own life, and being a freelancer, you're trying to design your own life. And then from that, injecting your own values into even client work if you can. Like as much as I can, I try to pitch stories I want to write about. And editors, if it fits the objectives of the outlet, it could work. And so I try to do that. But also, I kind of just resign to the fact that this is a good fit for this outlet. And this might be an original thing for this outlet. And then you can make it original by either injecting like a personal narrative, either your own, or finding a firsthand experience of somebody out there who has experienced this. Data, like original data, like a new guy or a new like study that came out, that's really great. Or just sources. Sources will always make your work original. So even if you're writing a guide on blah, blah, blah for the 8th time, you can always find a new source who can inject something different, their own insights. So those are ways to make, even though the topic may not be unique because like Paula doesn't write SEO-driven content, but there is a lot of need for that, right? So even if you're writing like a boring, like we have to sometimes write stuff like that. You can make it original as you can within the parameters. So I try to do that. And also they appreciate it too, like the readers, of course, and stuff. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of maneuvering and trying to do what the client wants along with what you want and putting your own spin on it as much as you can.
Yeah, I probably write about 5 to 10 articles a week, maybe. And coming from the science world, where the amount of facts you can know is basically infinite, right? When I started learning about personal finance, I was like, this is it. It's not that complicated. There's not that many things to write about. But if you can inject stories, like Jackie was saying, that's the key, because there's an infinite amount of people, and we all deal with money, right? So finding individual stories and ways to connect it with real people, telling it from a people standpoint and not like these are the rules of the Roth IRA standpoint has been a really good thing that's helped me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just go from $1 billion and work my way down. No, that's
So
a really
she asked, how do you price your services and how do you move up? I assume like how do you negotiate as you keep getting more and more experience?
great question because there's a wild west, right? Like for some people, like they may $50 an article is enough, and some people it's $1 a word. So there's a vast spectrum. And there's never going to be perfect science to this. A lot of times it's, once again, network, your community. So there's a lot of like content marketing, freelancer Facebook groups, which are great. And we talk about rates all the time. My mastermind group, we talk about rates all the time. So it's just talking to other writers actually helps because they may have worked with that outlet or they may have worked with that kind of thing. And it's really a value. So it's like, as you do more freelance writing, I feel like you can sense that your gut if it's a good rate for you. And as you start out, I think it's really, really eager to say yes to everything because you just want to get work. But as you do more and more of it, you're going to kind of get a sense for what is a good rate depending on so many things, not just word count, but like how much research is involved. Do you need to get sources? Can anyone else do this work? Or just a lot of what's a client? Because Stephanie O'Connell had a great quote. It's not what you're worth, it's what your work is worth. So sometimes you just have to gauge on the level of the client. If you're working with like a big major financial institution versus someone who's just, this is their blog and they just need you to help with it or something. I know it's a really difficult question because I don't know.
Oftentimes what I'd do is I would start with 50 cents a word as the like starting point in my head, and then I would adjust either upward or downward depending on both the the size and the means of the client, as well as the complexity of the job. So if it was a job where I would have to interview sources, that rate's going to go up. If it's, a fairly straightforward job where I have to write an article that, and especially if I've worked with the client in the past and I know that they're not going to send it back for like 3 revisions, then I would adjust it down. So, but I would usually start with that in mind and then make moves. And then the other thing that I would do is when I quote it to a client, I don't necessarily quote it as a per word thing, because what I have discovered, at least in my own experience, is that a lot of clients don't like the ambiguity of not being sure of exactly how much this article is going to cost if it's priced by the word. And so oftentimes what I'll say is, for an article that is between 500 to 700 words, I'll charge $250. And essentially what I'm saying is 50 cents a word at the floor of 500 words, but it's expressed in a way in which the client knows exactly what that's going to be, and so they can budget for it at an exact number.
I think pricing per word is, I want to say almost never a good idea, because then it's like, well, is it the word can I submit it? Is it the words that you edited it down to? Is it you sent it back for revisions and I added 50 words and it's that? I mean, it just gets, I think doing it by project. I had one client who asked for hourly and I thought, oh God, there's no way. I mean,
Hourly. Don't
yeah.
do hourly, guys.
So just pick a project rate and then every year just try to move it up a little.
Yeah, I started out making $75 for my first penny hoarder article that I wrote. So you'll have this floor when you start, and my strategy has been to, with every new client I bring on, try to bump up my rates just a little bit more. And it's really, really scary, because at some point I looked at the amount of money I was proposing and I was like, oh my God, I've never seen this much money in my life for the amount of work I'm doing before, and it's terrifying to ask for that. But again, knowing your network and asking people kind of what the ballpark rates that they're making are for different clients is really helpful, so you kind of know you're not just totally $1 million for this article. And just moving up every year. Every year I try to pitch new clients and grab new clients, and then I drop the lower ones so that you gradually move up the ladder over time.
And you're going to feel it. You're going to know when it's time to weed out clients who are lower paying or pain in the butt clients. And it is depending on the value you're giving, because my first client, I was getting $500 for 500 words, no sources. And I was like, what? But it was just, she was a marketing executive, and that's how they see content marketing. It's ads. So if you think about ads, $500 for an ad that could have an ROI of times 8 or 8 times 10, you meaning it could bring in 4,000 or 5,000 isn't much. So you kind of have to, it can go either way. You can start from 50, or you can go up, or you can get a really sweet client and then be spoiled and then be like, oh, I'll never get that client again, but it just depends.
I will say as a caveat, so I don't charge clients an hourly rate, but when I'm pricing out a piece, I like to think, okay, how long is this going to take? And I have an hourly rate in my head, and that hourly rate, if I said it out loud, it might seem really high to a client, but what you probably might not realize if you haven't started yet, if you're just getting into this, is that you're not necessarily going to be writing articles 40 hours a week. Emails take up probably 90 minutes of my day when I actually tracked it, and that's probably on average, because I like to get to inbox 0. You're going to be finding sources. You're just going to be spending time on social media. You're going to be thinking of pitch ideas. You're going to be invoicing, tracking expenses, sending out your taxes. You're not going to be writing for 40 hours a week. So if you do the math and it comes out to, $40 an hour, and you think, okay, well, I make $25 an hour at my day job. Well, that's still not necessarily a great rate for the amount of work that you can't bill for. So I would just say, try to pick an hourly rate in your head for the amount of the hours of writing that you can actually get done a week, and try to stick to that, and then increase it every once in a while.
Yeah, I have found that billable hours are about half of the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's tough for new clients too when you're bringing them on, because sometimes it might be more work than you anticipated. Sometimes it's less, and that's a great situation, but it can be kind of tricky to sort those things out. But keeping in track of those things in the long term will definitely help you figure out which clients maybe you should drop or keep.
Yeah, and totally like when I was first starting out, I tracked everything. So I tracked everything from research to interviewing sources to emails to writing, whatever, just to see like what the like how long it, what the billable, the hourly rate was for X client versus Y. Yeah.
And the other thing is, a friend of mine gave me this piece of advice. He said, don't drop your clients, just raise your rates. And then they'll drop themselves. So when I was when I was shutting down my freelance business, I did it slowly over the course of about a year, and I just did it by continually raising my rates, and until most of them just jumped off.
Yeah, no, that's a great strategy, because then you're saying there's also something to be said for being a premium brand. You know, a lot of times people think if I charge too high, they're going to think she's greedy. I think especially, I hate to say it, but like a lot of women have that fear. But a lot of times, if you price yourself too low, I have a client who she had hired a writer before me, and because the person had priced themselves so low, she ended up firing them partially because she thought if you price yourself this low, it means you don't value yourself and you don't value the work and you don't know what this all entails. So if you price yourself high, they're going to think, okay, she's a professional and an expert. She knows what she's talking about.
And you're hurting the business if you're pricing yourself so low, you know, because then other people think they can get the same work for less, and then it just hurts your fellow freelancers. It hurts yourself too, just because there's no real standard, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and also, like some of the money that you'll be making, you'll be using to reinvest back into your business, right? Some of that money that you'll be making, you'll be using to run a blog, to start a podcast, to come to conferences. So like what you're making is your gross revenue, and then from that, you're also paying the costs of both operating your business as well as growing your business. So if you aren't making enough to be able to cover all of that plus pay yourself, then you're undercapitalizing your business.
Yeah.
Yeah, those taxes aren't no joke.
Yeah, taxes, health insurance, all that.
Yeah, don't forget, if you're self-employed and you don't have a partner with health insurance, that is a pretty penny to pay. And don't forget your quarterly taxes. I'm sure we've all missed the deadline once or twice, and it's a real pain. I think we have time for one more. Yeah.
Yeah, so for people here like myself maybe who are like, they're just kind of in the earlier stage of getting started writing and they have a full-time job. But like me, I see myself, I want to be a full-time writer someday. So you're kind of building your resume on the blog, so to speak, so you have some writing clips to show. Did either of you have a full-time job while you started freelancing?
Oh, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
How
most
do
of
you
us have.
decide when it's ready to make that jump, so to
That's a
speak?
great question.
And then, second question, I mean, probably would be the first question, I guess, would be, so you do recommend writing to some of these sites and offering your service for free just to get their name in the beginning? Or
No.
not?
I
You
wouldn't.
don't offer yourself for free.
Okay.
If they say, oh, I can't pay contributors, I mean, sometimes it's good to negotiate, but don't offer for free because,
Like for the pennies order as an example, like I know they sell a pretty simple submission. To get their name as someone that I had written for, would it be a good idea to do an article that just they send a link to my site, or no, go ahead and right from the get-go charge for my services?
I would charge just right from the get-go, maybe like a couple one-off guest posts for another blogger while you're starting, like at the very first is what I would say would be the most, but no, never work for free after that.
Yeah, I would not work for free, period, because if I'm going to write something for free, I'd rather write something I want to write about and put it on my blog and have it as like a evergreen piece, you know? And also it's just, I think getting into the mindset of monetizing your writing is a really big step, and it's a hard step. So just to get used to just knowing how to talk in that way of charging is important. Yeah.
Oh, and I want to make the distinction between writing a guest post for a blogger versus writing an article for a company or an institution. Always, always, always charge companies or institutions.
Always, because you're just undercutting other people, and yeah, you should get. What was the first?
Yeah.
Oh, the transition. Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of us can relate to that. Like, I was just blogging for fun, and I was moonlighting. I had a full-time job at like a small publisher, and I got my first gig through Contently, and the value was just so. I was writing like 7-8 articles that month, and it was the same amount I was making at my day job. So I was like, oh, so there's this. I quickly saw the potential. And so I moonlit, I think I wrote for 3 or maybe 4 other places, like just moonlit. And then I took a contract job to do full-time content writing. And then that, after 5 weeks, they let me go. We were overstaffed. It was pretty terrifying. And so I went to FinCon the next day. Actually, it turned out. And I got all these leads. And I decided to just do full-time. Actually got a contract job for like $100,000. It was like $96,000 job, proofing. It sounded great, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. I said no to it. It was a really tough decision, the hardest decision actually, to do full-time freelancing, and it worked out. But there's just no easy. There's never going to be like a clear, yes, go, everything's awesome. It's going to be a risk and a fear involved.
So I think we're done, but I'm sure all of us will be around if you have any more questions or feel free to, ask us on Twitter, email. Thank you so much to our amazing panelists.